And I also heard the majority whip come to the floor and say the Republicans have only offered 4 amendments. Mr. President, I had offered 19 amendments, and so I ask unanimous consent that the pending amendment be set aside and that I be allowed to call up my amendment number 3148 to protect individuals facing skyrocketing premiums.
Is there objection?
I object.
Objection is heard.
Thank you. So I'll this time ask unanimous consent that the pending amendment be set aside and that I be allowed to call up amendment number 3153 to protect young, healthy persons from increased insurance premiums.
Mr. President.
Is there objection?
I object.
Objection is heard.
Well, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the pending, and these are not, I just heard the comments there. These are amendments that are aimed to keep the President's words, that we will get insurance premiums under control, that people will notice their premiums go down, that we will make it better for people, easier for people. The Democrats ought to accept all of these amendments because these are intended to do just that. So then I ask unanimous consent that the pending amendment be set aside and I be allowed to call up amendment number 3146, individual mandate penalties, and create personal accounts for young people who are penalized and they have to pay a fee and a fine if they don't obey the individual mandate, and that would go into an account for them so they could use that money to buy their own health insurance.
Mr. President.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Is there objection?
I object.
Objection is heard.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. And I understand this is going to improve Medicare. I've heard the chairman of the Finance Committee say this is going to make Medicare stronger. Well, I believe Medicare patients then ought to have the freedom to contract and have the right to privately contract for medical services with a physician of their choice. If, as the chairman of the Finance Committee has now recommended and has stated, if it doesn't work out the way that he had suggested. So I ask unanimous consent that the pending amendment be set aside and I be allowed to call up amendment number 2984, Medicare patient freedom to contract.
Is there objection?
5th time I object.
Objection is heard.
Thank you, Mr. President, and that's why I'm just not surprised when I read the polls that say negatives abound in poll about this bill, written in secret, brought to us just a little over 24 hours ago with a 383-page amendment, one that is now not going to be allowed to have any amendments offered. I just offered 4 different amendments aimed to strengthen the health care system of the country. Each time, the chairman of the Finance Committee is not even interested in hearing what the amendments are about.
Is there anyone wishing to vote, wishing to change their vote? If not, on this vote, the yeas are 60, the nays are 40. 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn, having voted in the affirmative, the motion is agreed to.
That her state, Louisiana, in the bill, would get $100 million in aid.
I am not going to be defensive about asking for help in this situation, and it is not a $100 million fix, it's a $300 million fix.
Well, I'm sorry. So we know you're hooking, but you're just not cheap.
But Democratic leaders gave Nebraska a special deal. They will never, ever be asked to pay for their share of Medicaid as a result of this deal, prompting one Republican to congratulate Nelson for playing The Price is Right.
Jim, you'll excuse me because my jaw, I'm picking it up off the table here. Is this deal for Ben Nelson forever and ever? Amen?
Forever and ever, and only for Nebraska. Even the others.
This bill was a result of backroom deals with specific senators, persuading them to vote for cloture, what has caused some people to call on the blogs and on the internet cash for cloture. In order to get 60 votes for cloture, we know one of the first examples of that was a so-called Louisiana Purchase. Charles Krauthammer said it well. He said, well, after watching Louisiana get $100 million in what some have called the Louisiana Purchase, she ought to ask for $500 million instead. We also know that in order to get 60 votes, the majority leader had to cut a deal with the senator from Nebraska, the senior senator from Nebraska, in order to get the vote for cloture. It's been widely reported that that meeting with the senior senator of Nebraska took place for 13 hours behind closed doors, after which they negotiated some language which purportedly no longer allowed the use of tax dollars to pay for abortions, but which, according to the Conference of Catholic Bishops and other pro-life groups, is completely ineffectual, and which restores or actually produces a taxpayer-paid-for abortions for the first time in 3 decades. What else did the senior senator from Nebraska get? Well, the state of Nebraska purportedly got a free ride from Washington's new unfunded Medicare mandates on the states. But of course, we know that every other state ends up paying for that sweetheart deal that the senior senator got for Nebraska. And then we know that in order to get 60 votes, the majority leader had to cut a special deal with the senators from Vermont. One senator from Vermont threatened to vote against the bill, but then, lo and behold, the manager's package included $600 million benefiting only that one state. The senator who threatened to vote no decided to vote yes after that special deal was included. The New York Times lists several other sweetheart deals that produced this monstrosity of a piece of legislation. The intended beneficiaries, though, in many instances were identified in a vague and sort of cryptic way. Individuals exposed to environmental health hazards recognized as a public health emergency in a declaration issued by the federal government in June the 17th. Well, there's only one state that would qualify for that, notwithstanding this sort of vague description designed to hide the ball and obscure what was actually happening through another sweetheart deal as part of this bill. Another item in the package would increase Medicare payments to doctors and hospitals in any states where at least 50% of the counties are, quote, frontier counties, defined as those having a population density of less than 6 people per square mile. And then we know that there was another $100 million sweetheart deal for an unnamed healthcare facility affiliated with an academic health center at a public research university in a state where there's only one public medical and dental school. The Associated Press reports that the state that qualifies for that special deal is the state of Connecticut, where the senior senator currently is in a tough re-election fight. Now, Mr. Axelrod, who is the architect of the campaign strategy for this administration to bring change to Washington, when asked about these special deals in the manager's amendment, his response was pretty telling. He said, "That's the way it has been. That's the way it will always be."